play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, umhoops.com. You're just grinning like a fool over there. What was that?
I'm making sure our new audio
we got new
works.
we got new equipment here. We're in the home office in Ann Arbor. This is an exciting podcast. This is like getting dangerously professional, Dylan. You came into the house with a box of microphones. What's this thing called?
It's a recorder.
Recorder? No, I thought that's called like
it's
a mixer. Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's like a portable mixer.
It's big time.
Let's not brag about our new equipment setup until we find out if it works.
People will complain regardless, so
We'll see.
let's just embrace it.
We'll see.
Today's podcast is a Michigan-centric podcast. Big news on the Michigan front today. The first true commitment of the Juwan Howard era. 2020 commit, Isaiah Todd pledging his verbal to Michigan this evening. I know Franz Wagner's I think he will always technically be the first recruit.
Here's the thing. This will be Juwan Howard's first recruiting class.
Class.
No one's going to refer to the 2019 class as Juwan Howard's recruiting class.
Right, but he convinced Franz Wagner to come to Michigan.
He did.
So Franz will always be his actual first recruit. This is just different.
He didn't host Franz Wagner on an official visit.
No one did, technically, other than Saudi, basically. But anyway, so we're going to get into the Isaiah Todd commitment. Today was Michigan Media Day on top of that. So we will get into some takeaways from talking to players, watching a little bit of open run. Early next week, we're going to come back with a Michigan State podcast. And then later in the week will be a very special edition of the Moving Screen. We hope, if everything comes together. More on that later. So before we hop into this real quick, make sure you are subscribed to umhoops.com. If you want a terrific overview on Isaiah Todd, who he is, where he stands in recruiting rankings, and full scouting report and video breakdown of his various talents, that is the place for it. Dylan, I think you did a really good job with that breakdown. I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here in my office.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think a lot of people tell me they don't like to watch the videos until someone commits because they think it's bad luck. So you can all log in.
That is next level juju right there.
And watch that now.
Whoa. And on the athletic.com, I used this opportunity to look back at Juwan Howard being the first member of the 1991 Michigan recruiting class. And he was the domino that they needed there, and was, since being hired at Michigan, basically came in trying to convince somebody somewhere to be his first domino. So tried to kind of dovetail those two ideas and talk to some old blast from the past names for that piece. Brian Dutcher, Mike Boyd, Jay Smith, guys who were on the staff when Juwan Howard became the first commitment of what became the Fab Five. So it was really interesting as someone who wasn't obviously here for all of that, and it was cool to kind of tell that story. And regardless of what people think of the Fab Five and the fallout of it, like Juwan Howard's recruitment was pretty straightforward. So take that for what it is. But their thoughts on how that all went down will be in my story. 2 p.m. is not up, but should be shortly. So
it should be up when you listen to this podcast.
For sure.
I will not compliment you on your piece because I haven't read it yet, so stay tuned on that.
Wow.
I can't blindly compliment you. I have to read it.
This is fair.
These compliments are hard-earned. These are honest things we're giving out here.
All right. Let's get into it. Isaiah Todd. First commitment, 2020 class.
Number
joins,
12 ranked player in the country.
Joins Zeb Jackson, So I guess he's Juwan Howard's first
Juwan
commitment
Howard's first
of the
commitment.
2020 class. Just keep track, folks.
And Juwan Howard has over and over referred to it, going what you were saying, off that domino theory, looking for the first player. So he clearly has put an emphasis on this, that he's looking for someone to be his first recruit, his first guy.
I'm going to put you right on the spot. Because here's the first thing people want to hear. Will Isaiah Todd ever actually play for Michigan? Odds. Give it to me.
I think he will. I would say better than 50% chance. I think if he was serious about going the overseas route right now, he would just do that, right? I think that he is not really in a place where, if you look at qualified players who have decided to go overseas right now, most would be considered consensus top 5, top 10 picks. If you look at RJ Hampton, he's showing up in mock drafts next year before he made the decision, right? If you look at LaMelo Ball, same deal, right? Todd's stock right now, I don't know that he's a consensus top 15 lottery pick type of prospect right now. His stock has kind of fallen a little bit over the last year, and it's not a slam dunk that the overseas route would lead to him being a lottery pick in that sense.
I would say the guys who are in that conversation are not only the consensus top 5s, but also guys who eligibility are non-starters.
I said qualified.
Okay, fair. Sorry.
So there's a lot of players in that mold that you will see go that route, or the workout program out in LA where they just spend a year working out. But in terms of players, I mean, maybe Baisley is kind of on the edge, but that was different again because he just sat out for a year. Yeah. So is it possible? It's absolutely possible. Right now, I don't think you go through with the whole commitment ceremony and all of that if you're like, I'm pretty much going overseas, right? Yeah. He talked to USA Today, I think, their high school recruiting site. It looked like an interview done over the weekend at USA Basketball, talking about recruiting people to follow him, join the class, right? Like, you don't do that if you're convinced you're going overseas.
Said the same thing to The Athletic's Brian Bennett in a piece that you can find on the site now.
Okay.
There you go.
My apologies.
Yeah, get the hell out of here at USA Today.
Well, it was about committing to Michigan. The story that you are referring to was written about.
Yeah, I know.
It's a different story.
I know. But to the overarching point here, I mean, the people that I've spoken to over there, it was not, when I brought up the topic overseas thing, it was not that, like, kind of shrugged the shoulders like, fingers crossed. It was way more confident than I anticipated based on the way people have been talking about this overseas thing. And I don't know Isaiah Todd at all. I haven't talked to him, have never seen him in person, so this is all secondhand. But it was a high level of confidence when I brought this up to some people who I would trust to ask on the topic of, will this guy ever actually play here? You know? So take that for what it's worth. Certainly not saying that it couldn't happen, but I will operate under the assumption that this dude is one of 2 members of the 2020 class.
Now, if he goes out and drops 35 and 15 in the McDonald's All-American game,
fair.
Might want to check on those equation. I think, like, you have to think about, if you're considering the situation, it's if all of a sudden he starts showing up, it's just really the NBA draft process that we're so used to after the college basketball season is more and more going to impact high school recruiting.
Well,
because these programs in Australia, they're really pushing the idea of trying to create a feeder system to bring people over, really kind of foster that talent. They played a bunch of exhibition games over here. I know they played in Memphis a game. They want to make it a viable option, and I think that everyone's watching RJ Hampton. They're watching LaMelo Ball to see how that goes, right? So I think that's going to impact. It's not just Isaiah Todd. It's multiple players in the top 20 high school rankings. I know Jalen Green is another guy who everyone has kind of thrown out as, oh, well, might go overseas. Well, Memphis is still recruiting the hell out of him. Like, this Oregon's still recruiting the hell out of him. It's just kind of part of the game at this point.
Yeah. And really, I do think there's going to be a domino effect here. And we talked about this like months ago, where I think the one day we put it at over under 1.5 5 stars in his first class. And when we kind of talked through it, it was like there's no in between. It's either going to be 0 or 2 or 3. It won't just be 1, because if they get 1, the rest will follow. And then lo and behold, Juwan essentially said the same thing in Chicago at Big Ten Media Day 2 weeks ago, where he said, I'm looking for 1. And I buy that all day. I think that this will open the door, and it'll be 2 or 3 guys. And the thing is, if Isaiah Todd never plays at Michigan, but he opens the door to 2 more 5-star guys committing, those guys will. So, win-win all around if you're Michigan, no?
Well, yeah, I don't think that, like you say, people are confident that he's going to play college basketball. They're not making decisions on the whim of, oh, well, at least it'll look good at the time, right? Like, does it help? If it goes wrong, does it still good? Yeah, but much into that whole idea of, well, at least it'll prop up our recruiting pitch for a couple weeks here.
I'm not saying prop up a recruiting pitch. I'm saying that it's a lot easier for guys of that caliber to commit once one is in the door.
It is, and it gives Michigan a legitimate seat at the table, and you can say, we're in this game. We're one of the 5, 6, 7 schools that are recruiting these one-and-done guys. Mm-hmm. We're a viable option. We're going to – I mean, if Isaiah Todd plays at Michigan next year, they're going to be a nationally relevant team.
For sure.
He's good enough to be in that conversation. Mm-hmm. I think he's an impact player from day one. So it gives you that confidence if you're another 5-star that you're going to have another guy to play with.
Yeah.
Right? You've seen this Duke, Kentucky, Memphis, they start to build a little bit of momentum in the same way, where everyone kind of follows that mold of super teams in the NBA where, I'm going to go team up with this guy. And if everyone's just there for a year, really the teams that only recruit from that pool are the teams that can kind of accommodate a whole team of freshmen, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, like, the list is there, and you use the word dream class is in play in the piece that you wrote. What does that look like?
I think you look for another big, which the most likely candidate right now is Hunter Dickinson, who is visiting Duke this weekend. I believe you tweeted that Michigan will be in home with him on Monday.
Correct.
That's right off of his Duke visit, which is his last official visit.
And I was told that there is thought that his decision could come, he hasn't announced a date, right?
His decision should come in the next coming weeks, right? Like he's deciding early.
I was told there's people thinking right now over there that it could be done before the end of next week, his decision.
Yeah, I mean, he's in a point where he's done with everything after this visit, and it's just a decision. There's a lot of recruitments that are going to wrap up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And he is definitely probably at the front of that line as far as Michigan's concerned. I think from there, if you can get 2 bigs, you have Todd and Dickinson, you look for a couple of playmaking guards or wings. And Michigan's problem, I guess, right now is that 2 of those guys they're after are going to be late deciders. They're not going to sign early. So right now it looks like basically all hands on deck to try to convince Moses Moody or Jaden Springer that they should jump on board now.
Yeah. And it's one of those, like, now's the time. You know, I feel like anytime you get a commitment of this magnitude, you can accelerate other people to be like, I want to get on board.
You can definitely try. And, like, that's the move is to just re-raise, right?
Right.
Push further. And Moses Moody was on his official visit with Isaiah Todd. It was just the 2 of them, I think, that weekend. So they and their families have kind of created a relationship there. Moody is visiting Arkansas this weekend. He's from Arkansas, so he has a lot of home state ties there. His parents took a visit to Arkansas without him a couple weeks ago. So went and checked out.
You all can imagine the face I just made.
Went and checked out the red and white scrimmage there. So there's a family tie, like there's a draw there, right? Because he's such a local kid. But if he's not going to Arkansas right now, Michigan has kind of risen to near the top of that list.
Yeah. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room here. I'm not talking about Otis in the living room. I wonder how comfortable a lot of Michigan fans are right now, because this is all shiny and new and stuff like that. But I have a very distinct feeling that if there was a coaching change at Michigan State or Ohio State or whatever, and out of nowhere that program suddenly becomes involved with players of this caliber and one and dones and all these guys who are kind of in the mix with your Dukes and your Kentuckys and your Kansases. Michigan just beat out a guy the second school was Kansas. There would be a lot of eye raising and like, well, you know, what is it? What's going on there? So, I mean, between your message board and stuff like that, you have much more probably finger on the pulse of what diehards might be reacting to this. In that it's like, because point being, like, there's two sides of the coin where Michigan fans for so long were like, Beeline needs to get all Americans and blah, 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 blah. And then the counterpoint to that would always be like, yeah, well, dancing in those waters kind of can mean certain things and bring you into contact with guys who things get complicated with.
I think the bigger thing is that the last decade has really convinced most Michigan basketball fans that the best way to build a team is year-over-year development evaluation.
No.
Well, like,
people don't believe that. They were still wanting 5 stars when Beeline was going to the Final Four with 3 stars.
But you can make a real case of, is one and done the best way to actually win a national championship?
I agree with that.
You look at the Virginias, the Villanovas.
Totally.
So I think that is the kind of the medicine that Michigan fans have been taking over the last decade. And now you're in a place where you're going to try to make a run at that one more time with the team without any one and dones and then just dive head first. Right. What that looks like, I don't know, but I think we said this on like the first podcast after Juwan Howard got hired. He's not going to build a team like John Beeline.
Sure.
The best way for Juwan Howard, the best asset that Juwan Howard has to sell is Juwan Howard. Mm-hmm. And that's an asset because he can recruit and he can sell that as a figure that people will be drawn to and want to come play for, right?
Sure.
Like John Beeline sold the way that he played basketball. Mm-hmm. So he would build that system. If Juwan Howard's not going to recruit 5 stars, I don't think Juwan Howard's going to be as successful as anyone wants him to be. I think it's pretty simple.
I would tend to agree with that. The interesting part of this is like when you're in the mix of the programs recruiting these guys, 5 stars, one and dones, well, there's 2 elite coaches in the country who are the top dogs in this conversation. It's obviously Kay and Cal, and like they're good coaches. They are established head coaches, and people who say that John Calipari can't coach are idiots. They don't have no idea what they're talking about. Acting like he like rolls the ball out is nonsense. Like those dudes can coach, and it's very interesting for the Michigan, Memphis, Penny Hardaway, Juwan Howard to be right in play with these guys who've been head coaches at the college level for 30 years. It's like, how much are you matching wits, X's and O's wise? How much is it talent versus talent? Like, it's just a whole fascinating dynamic, I think, in terms of like how the power structure of college basketball is starting to kind of shift on a axis, is how I'm looking at this.
Beyond that, there's not when Duke recruits like that, there's still a North Carolina. Mm-hmm. There's not a team in the Big Ten that's really swimming in this pool.
That's a great point.
So what does a team that gets a multiple 5-stars in a class at the Big Ten look like, and how does that translate in a league where that's just not really the model?
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, the closest thing would, I guess, be Ohio State under Thad, right? Like that was the last time that you really had a school that consistently recruited 5-stars.
They dominated the conference.
Yeah, they did. But Thad was also a hell of a coach.
Sure.
Like X's and O's coach, I think too. Not saying Juwan isn't. We have no idea. And like Michigan State's model is much more a 5-star. It's sort of like harvest your grain and then take the top shelf 1 or 2 item and sprinkle it in, which I think is a smart way to build a program. How Tom Izzo wants to build a program, I think he's pretty much proven that, but he's not recruiting multiple one and dones in each class.
Yeah.
I don't think he wants to deal with that at this point in his career. I don't think he has to.
No, the closest thing would have been that 15 class where you could have potentially had, maybe if Langford was considered of that caliber to potentially
16.
be. I'm sorry, 16.
It was
the Bridges, Cassius, Langford, Ward class. That's the closest.
But that was all. I guess the Langford was out of state, but that's still a relatively local. You have an Ohio kid, a Michigan kid. Like the last time that you had a school that really would go out of area and land 5-star recruits in this conference, it's a change, and we'll see how it works out. I mean, you could make an argument that other schools will more consistently. They're so well coached and so consistent that it could be hard to win with one and dones. We'll see.
Right. All very interesting. I want to hear your thoughts. You've watched probably more video on Todd than
probably
anyone outside of the staff, maybe. So your thoughts, pluses and minuses.
First thing that jumps off when you watch him is just kind of his natural ability and how fluid he can move. He's really well suited to play in a up and down grassroots style basketball game where he can push it in transition. He has a ridiculous Euro step at 6'10", dunk on people, great rebounder. He has all that, right? And he's a really good ball handler. Like, he can dribble the ball ridiculously well for a 6'10" guy. The problem is that he thinks that the only reason to dribble in the half court is to create space for a jump shot. And so he just settles too often. And you watch him play, and you see him do kind of the good thing, right? You see him beat a guy off the dribble and just dunk on him. You see him pin a guy in the post, drop step, dunk it. You see him do all these things, and then you realize that the other 15 clips are him having a guy 3 inches shorter than him in the post, turning around doing a one-legged fadeaway. You see him taking 3 dribbles and taking a 18-foot jumper. So it's really just he can get any shot he wants on the court. I think he probably needs to get a little better driving all the way to the basket, but he just needs to take somewhat better shots. And that, I mean,
it's coaching,
that's
it's maturity.
Coaching, that's maturity. Like, when you can get any shot on the court, you take any shot on the court. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at that age.
Right.
But I think that is what it will take for him to be a guy that all of a sudden, because this guy was the number 1 player in the country after his freshman year. So I think some of his drop has been sort of evaluated through that lens. Once you're the number 1 ranked kid in the country, you're supposed to be, you're like evaluated against LeBron James, right? Like, it's like
people will only look for what's wrong.
Yeah. And if he was in some small school and that no one had heard of and all of a sudden showed up doing this summer, he'd probably be ranked 5th, right? Like, it's sort of one of those things where you're a known commodity and people start picking apart your game. I just think he really needs to become more efficient if he's going to be a guy that NBA teams really drool over and a guy that really dominates in college. Right? Like, he's going to get 15 and 8 a night just because that's what he does. But is he getting it on 21 shots or is he getting it on 15 shots?
Right. I mean, but the thing is, like, the raw, at his size, the raw skills, and I don't even, actually, raw is the wrong word. Like, he actually has a pretty refined skill set. It's just decision-making. It's probably not doing shit you see on TV in the NBA is what a lot of it is. right?
Yeah,
Like,
he's basically cursed with the fact that he can do the shit you see on
Exactly.
TV, so he wants to show
like
it off.
the fact that he can, play with the ball in both hands a little bit and not immediately dribble it off his knee at 6'10", like it enables him to do bad stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Right. It's like, it was my theory on Jordan Poole last year, where you'd watch his shot selection. I'm like, dude is watching way too much James Harden, like shots.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what you see. That's what Isaiah Todd's film screams to me. But like, that's one of those, go play at Michigan, think you're hot shit, and just get benched a few times, and suddenly you simplify your game and you are a star.
Yeah, and it's not that you don't want him to take some of those hard shots. It's that you want him to go after. You'd rather see him fail taking the smart shots a little more often.
Yeah.
Like, I think I had some stats that he basically, on any sort of ISO or ball screen or spot, like face-up drive, he takes a jumper about 2/3 of the time and drives to the rim about 1/3 of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You want to flip that, right? You're 6'10", you can dunk on anyone. And even when he drives, he tries to dunk on everyone. Like, just lay the ball in.
Which, you know what? This program, like,
Well, yeah, it's...
Michigan, it's been a long time since Michigan had a guy with that mindset. So, like,
And that's fine.
Yeah.
And his measurables are about in line with DJ Wilson. That was one of the closest comps I could find as far as his wingspan and all that. And he's still skinny, right? He's 206 pounds, and we're calling him a power forward, and that's really what he is. Like, I don't think he's skilled enough. There are guys in the NBA with his kind of measurables that are legitimately like a 3.
mm-hmm.
I still think he projects most to be a skilled 4. Rather, like...
At the college level, for sure.
But even at the NBA level. Like
that I don't care about, but...
Yeah, at the college level, he'll play the 4.
Yeah, right.
But you know what I mean? How
Yeah.
you look at a guy from that perspective where he is more than big enough, but I don't think he has his NBA draft stock, his measurables will be above average for his position, not like elite.
Yeah.
Like, what was Jaren Jackson's wingspan? Was like 7'5".
Yeah, I mean, he was a pterodactyl.
So he doesn't have that. He's just 7-foot wingspan, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not off the charts. I think that kind of limits his ceiling as far as defense and kind of his overall ceiling in that regard.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's a good rim protector. He's not a Jaren Jackson type of rim protector.
Do you... Flags is not the right word, but like anything in his game that gives you pause in the one and done conversation.
It's just his shot selection for me. It's that he could come and play a just inefficient game, and his numbers would not scream draft me to the NBA. Like,
Right.
there are
a lot of inefficient players have been drafted though,
and a lot have kind of disappeared though, right?
Sure.
Like, so that, like, does he do enough to make scouts overlook that inefficiency, or does he become a little more efficient?
right?
That's what it comes down to for me.
Do you know anything about his defense?
I love how he can. I think he needs to get a little faster laterally,
Mm-hmm.
but he's really good at getting beat off the dribble and then recovering to
Closing.
block
Yeah.
block a shot at the rim.
Yeah.
I mean, EYBL defense, it's like you're going for highlights a lot. It's not the
Yeah.
best job. Like, being in a college defensive system is worlds different, and
Right.
high school film is just worthless in that regard. He's a foot taller than everyone else.
Right.
But I don't think you look at him and you're saying he's going to change your defense. Like, there are defense bigs, especially, that you're like, if you have this guy, you're going to... Jaren Jackson is a good example. I don't think he's that level of defender, but
Yeah.
he's probably a little underrated. Like, he has a reputation as not being a rim protector, and I think he's above average in that sense.
Okay. If I had to ask you to predict what this leads to, or what this is telling you about what, like, Juwan wants this to look like system-wise, playing-wise, would you draw any conclusions from a player like Isaiah Todd being the first guy they bring in?
I have a hard time saying yes, because he was the first guy they could bring in. Like, they would have brought other people in if they could have got it across the finish line, right? I mean, it's positionless. I mean, he's fairly positionless. Mm-hmm. Pros are usually pretty positionless. Right. So if positionless means 5 pros, then, well, might be a great offense. Like,
yeah, right.
I don't know that he's not a system guy.
Yeah.
Anyone can use a stretch 4 who can rebound, dribble, shoot. He doesn't really pass, but for another day.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because when you look at this guy, so he's 6'10", and like in a beeline system, you could possibly project him to play some 5 because he would want 5 out, right?
You could, but he would be a beeline 4. He would be
ideally. Ideally, he would. But if he were coming in next year and John Teskey's graduating and, say Colin Castleton, whatever, isn't good or something,
Newsflash, everyone who's 6'10"
would be possibly
even if they're a 4
playing the 5.
They're a 5 in the last 5 minutes of a game. It's just inevitable. I don't think that will change in this system.
But in terms of time that you dedicate for that person playing that position in practice can be different.
Yeah, sure. But look at DJ Wilson. He played the 4 all year, and then all of a sudden he had to play the 5. And that's not
when they wanted to be good.
And that's not a Michigan thing. It's across basketball. You go small late in games now. Everyone does it. And I don't think Juwan Howard will be any different, especially.
But I'm saying, I wonder how much of a chance there is that Juwan Howard isn't different on that, and that this is just the way they play
as a small 5.
Yeah.
So you think he's being recruited as a small 5?
I have no idea. This is what I'm picking your brain on what you think that could be.
I don't think so.
So you think they definitely want the Dickinson type, true 5-man?
I don't think you ever land Isaiah Todd if you've ever used the word 5 in his presence.
It's fair.
So if it's a
long
con,
yeah, recruits have never been lied to.
No, but I don't think that Isaiah Todd's the guy you have to lie to, right? Like. You say that. I mean, I think you want to.
You know how you recruit? By saying what recruits want to hear.
You recruit him to play the 4 is what I'm saying.
Sure. It would just be interesting to see. With all the position, everything's positionless now. Well,
if you don't get another center, then yeah, he's the backup 5 probably. Because I don't know. There's not really another one on the roster.
Right.
So I mean, that's just how college basketball works, right?
Sure. Do you have anything more on this before we? How long are we in here?
32. Do you have anything? You watched the video. Anything catch your eye?
He looks like a pro to me, man. I don't know. I watch a 6'10", this whole unicorn thing in the NBA. This is the thing now. When I watch him play, he looks like one of those types of guys. Because he can put the fact that he can catch the ball in his left hand on the run and switch to his right hand and dribble and finish and not look like a gangly mess because he is a teenager is beyond impressive to me. There was one clip you had where he's on the run in transition and he catches the ball on the move and flips a cross-court pass to a guy on the move and hits him in stride and he finishes. And it's just one of those, can't teach that. There are things, especially when guys are at certain sizes, that I don't care how good of a coach you are and how many drills you do, guys just can't do shit.
Yeah.
This guy, the way his hands jumped out to me the most. Finish with both hands, dunk with both hands, catch the ball with both hands. He just seems so gifted that, looks like one and done to me. And I think he's a guy with his raw talent that, can average 9 and 7 and be a one and done.
Yeah, that's...
I don't think he needs to be an All-American.
Yeah, so, of note, he was not in ESPN's 2021 mock draft, which I found a bit interesting. I have a big problem with conveying that information in mock drafts 2 years before a draft. I think a big board would be a lot more useful information, but we can take that up with ESPN later. It's just, do you agree that's a little weird? Because you're basically projecting who's in or out of the draft and then mocking that. I mean, it's just weird.
If you want to get into a conversation of criticizing mock drafts, that's a whole different vibe.
Okay, fair. But the point is that he's not considered like a consensus top 10 pick in the 2021 draft right now. So he has something to prove, at least in that regard. Mm-hmm. That can change very quickly, right? Like Zion wasn't going to be the number 1 pick at this time last year.
Right.
I think that he is a guy, like you look for guys with half of his ability, but his kind of frame, and you think like, oh, these are the diamond, like DJ Wilson. Mm-hmm. Like you're like, if that guy ever figures it out, he'll be a pro. Right. This is a guy who basically already has it just about figured out in high school. So he's sort of just way ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. He's the guy you'd rave about if he was just some uncut gem, right?
Well, here's the thing. He's a guy who, at the talent level, at his size, that Michigan was never even the conversation for. It would just be like, oh, well, if you're 6'10 and you're that good, you're going to Duke or Carolina or Kansas or Kentucky or whatever. And Michigan just got one of those guys. So, like, this is why we've been talking about this for half an hour to anyone, like a Michigan State fan who might be listening, being like, why don't you talk this way about Michigan State's recruits? Well, it's because Michigan State's recruits have basically been the same, for lack of a better term, for Tom Izzo's tenure. Like, they just do the way they do this. This is so totally different, what happened today. And this being the type of guy that Michigan just landed, since I've been here, at least, so 7 years, 6 years, whatever. Guys this good, this big, with the future that he might have. Answer me this question. John Beilein sees this dude's film for the first time. Does he even bother?
John Beilein walks onto the wrong court and sees Isaiah Todd and Scotty Barnes going up the court, and he goes into the other gym.
Right?
I mean,
like, this is the fact of the matter.
Yeah, this is probably about as far from a Beilein recruit as you could get. Mm-hmm. But the weirdest part about this whole thing, and the reasons can probably be debated forever, but Michigan almost got him like fairly uncontested, right? The only schools that hosted him for official visits were Michigan and Kansas, a Kansas program about to go face the NCAA.
Right.
Kentucky already was so loaded up they didn't need him for an official visit. Mm-hmm. He posted on Instagram they didn't invite him for an official visit. Mm-hmm. North Carolina didn't invite him for an official visit. So it's sort of the perfect happenstance in a lot of ways for Juwan Howard, right? Like, makes you think about the situation.
Yeah. It does. And now the question is, what next? And I'll be really damn curious.
Putting you on the record now.
Okay.
How many early signing players does Michigan take? So if you have 2 right now, what's your total on November 15th or whenever the early signing period
I'll say they get 1 more in the fall, 1 more in the spring, and then a transfer.
Okay. And if you get 2 more 4, 5-star type kids, that's probably a top 5 class, I would say.
Yeah, I think 24/7 or Riles, I don't know which one, had it at like 16 right now with Zeb and him. That means nothing, but the bigger question when it comes to ranking and next year and blah, 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 the real conversation on that is if you have Franz Wagner for a second year.
Yeah, I think you want Franz, and I think you need to sign a second playmaker. Well, not a point guard. Zeb's a point guard.
Fair.
A combo.
Yeah. Combo.
A second creator.
Yes.
Because I think you have...
Positionless basketball. That's great. All right. Let's do some media day stuff. And then we'll go to the bar.
What stood out to you? So, Biggest difference between a Juwan Howard media day. No, this is we don't want to frame it that way.
We don't want to
All right,
frame
what
it
do you
that
want
way.
us? What do you
We don't want to frame it that
take
way.
away from this?
So Juwan Howard did. Let's just walk people through it real quick, so that they know what the hell we're actually talking about. Juwan Howard had a 40-minute press conference. We'll say
35, I think.
Yeah, said nothing of note.
He asked you a question. He asked you to tell a story. That was nice.
So I asked, for the story that I was working on today, I asked Juwan if he remembered the first recruiting contact that Michigan had with him, and he countered by saying, "I don't. What have you been told?" Which, as a reporter who was working on a story and in a room with 40 other people working on stories, is worst case scenario. But I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure it wasn't clever.
I was disappointed it wasn't. You can read at theathletic.com tomorrow afternoon.
Subscribe, 40% off. Yeah, he said nothing during the press conference, and whatever. I think that's just kind of going to be the way that it is. Everything that he said has been heard before, and that's fine. Then it was player availability for about 40, or I'm sorry, assistant coach availability.
Coaches.
I spent the whole time with Howard Isley, who I have never met. So he's a very soft-spoken guy. He's definitely in the same realm as Juwan Howard, if anything further behind in terms of like
Learning.
being outward and being kind of, I don't know, outspoken in this role, whatever you want to say. I think you know what I mean. Like, he was kind of just watched his words, wasn't looking to startle the horses, didn't want to say anything. You asked him anything that, like, for any kind of specific on, like, the most minute thing, and it was not happening.
I think you said he's known Juwan since he was 17.
Since he was 17, yeah. They played some AAU ball. Obviously, once, he played with Jalen Rose, and Juwan Howard basically was recruiting Jalen Rose, and they were in contact. They played 1 year together in the league, 2000-2001, with the Mavs, but have known each other basically since they were teenagers. And so the assistant coaches talked to everyone. Do you have any takeaways from that? I know you were with all three, right?
Yeah, I stopped by all three.
Anything of note?
No, a lot of... I mean, Martelli called Franz basketball rain man.
What the hell does that mean?
Means he's just a basketball savant, as he put it. But a lot of the usual. I don't think anything earth-shattering, really, from the assistant coaches.
The one thing that I thought was interesting from Howard Isley was he did use certain descriptors that I feel like can continue to kind of paint the picture of what this will look like a little bit more in terms of system changes.
He is the supposed brains of the offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's coaching the guards, and the offense starts with the guards. So, he's like, it's going to be more open space, more downhill. So, you have to think quasi ball screen, dribble drive. Like that's just kind of what it sounded like to me. Obviously, the tempo will be up. And when he was asked about David DeJulius, he definitely was...
I heard the word freedom.
Freedom. And it was not thinking and system, simplifying, all of these things where we watched some practice. If you just watch David DeJulius shoot the ball, I mean, he has a beautiful shot. He can hit it from 30 feet. And he just seems like a guy who, when he's flowing a little bit...
Weren't you ripping to Julius on our last pod?
What?
I feel like you really came down to me when I said he could play the two.
Well,
did we have this
you
conversation?
look at his numbers, yeah.
You were like, no chance.
I'm not saying he's going to play the two right now. I'm just saying what Howard Isley talked about him.
You're just on this free David Julius movement here. And you're on the complete opposite side of the spectrum.
I'm not hyping David DeJulius. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of guys on this roster who have been non-commodities, and a lot of it's been part of the 3-4 year development of what it takes to play in the previous regime. And some of these guys who might have felt like they did not have a place to live or breathe suddenly are just playing basketball. And I got the sense based on Howard Isley's comments that is what the staff is telling David DeJulius. Because, look, if it doesn't happen for David DeJulius this year, well then, like, what is it? What is he as a Michigan basketball player? Because there's more dudes coming, clearly. So,
the way I
that was the time, man.
Is if they're trying to let David, they're trying to give as much oxygen to players 5 through 12 or however many are on the roster to breathe. Just breathe, and just someone take the role. There's roles there. Someone needs to go and take it. And I think if you asked anyone to say right now, like, if you could only pick 2 of those guys, like, who are the ones you want, I don't know that they'd know. And I think
agree.
That's
Totally
really
agree.
the biggest question about this team right now is who are those?
And I don't think they're going to know going into App State. And they might not know going into Louisville.
They might not. And it might change at Christmas. Like,
Sure,
you don't. I mean,
sure.
I think but they're just trying to empower those guys for someone to take that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Brandon Johns taking his role, David DeJulius, Eli Brooks, like Adrian Nunez. They just need someone there to really show something, take something, and be something in those spots. That's the biggest thing that stands out to me from Media Day. And everyone's saying the right things about those players, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think everyone knows, can you show it on the court, right? And no one really knows.
Yeah, and so much of it is going to be not only the personnel, but, how they can do what he wants. Because it's personnel that was brought in for a different system, and we're not exactly sure what this will be. And then defensively, like, I still think this is 100% going to be defense first in terms of playing time. Maybe with the exception of Franz, because he'll probably be given a little bit more of a learning curve than anyone else. Is that fair?
Franz, they like his defense.
I understand that.
How many people have you heard how many people did you hear receive a compliment about their defense at Media Day today?
I've also had a lot of people, coaches that I've been around,
That
consistently compliment the one thing that everyone questions about a player, and then you see it live and you say, "Oh no, well, it's as advertised."
I think Franz. I don't think he can guard 1-on-1 very well. I think he'll be real. He'll make surprising plays off the ball.
He's very long, and he's very smart. He can probably read angles,
and if you remember,
get into passing lanes. But I watched those games overseas, and when you see some of those Euro dudes put the ball on the deck and he's a half step slow, like,
yeah, he'll give up dribble penetration.
Right.
But if you remember Mo, his hands and timing were really good from day one in terms of cheating for steals and all that. I
thought it was interesting talking, this is completely unrelated, but when we were talking defense, that the first thing Juwan mentioned when he was asked about the differences between college and NBA was defensive 3 seconds.
Yeah, it's obviously the biggest difference between the two games.
I didn't even think of it because I don't watch enough NBA.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, it completely changes.
Yeah.
That's why you can't play pack line defense in the NBA. You can't play zone defense in the NBA.
I don't watch the NBA, so I was just like, when he said that, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that would be a major change in coaching.
I feel like we've talked about that before, and I've said the defense is a lot different. Like,
I don't remember you talking defensive 3 seconds.
Well, we talked about how the rules are different. That's what I mean.
Yeah, fair.
And there's college. That's why I wonder, because it was when you kept saying, I think they'll play completely man to man. This team is screaming to play zone.
I don't think they're going to play zone.
But I think you should. If you're going to put Franz and Isaiah on the court together.
You only play zone, though, if you know how to coach zone.
That's true.
And looking at this staff, I don't know if Sadi's ever coached zone at Oakland or anything like that. Phil did run some zone at St. Joe's, and it was typically not great, other than the teams that he had. That could be pretty good at it, and you're in the Atlantic 10.
We can slow down on this. St. Joe's in 2011 talk. Miami Heat led the NBA in percentage of zone possessions on defense last year.
So you think he can coach zone?
Miami played more zone than any other team in the league.
Well, that would be interesting.
And zone, but the thing is, again, zone is very different in the NBA than in college.
Yeah.
But what is interesting to me is that there's basically
It's interesting.
cheat codes in college defense. There's things that you do defensively in college that you would never think of doing in the NBA. Right? Like, so I wonder if that could be almost a blind spot for Howard, in the sense that he's the defensive guy when he's going to have to learn. I'm sure it's not that he can't learn those new ideas, but he's going to have to kind of be exposed to that, right?
You were sitting on this great nugget about them playing more zone than any team in the NBA. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I swear we talked about this on the podcast.
I doubt it.
Again, defense is very different in the NBA. What it means to play zone is different. But I think that when he talks about actual basketball, and those are the most insightful things he says, right? Like when he's talking about the rule differences and all this. So that was probably one of the most interesting answers he had over 35 minutes when he was talking about you have 2.9 seconds to get out of the paint, right? So it changes all your help and all that you can do in college versus the NBA.
Right. Okay, so other players. You were bouncing around from guy to guy to guy. I was really only able to spend some time with Isaiah Livers, Franz Wagner, and Xavier Simpson. So I
spent a lot of time with those three also. So
well, that's not good.
So
Should
I couldn't
spread it
tell
out
you
for the pod.
I did not spread out for the pod.
Moving screens called for a block.
Oh boy, take a drink. I'm curious your buy or sell on Isaiah Livers, small forward, Isaiah Livers improved handle. What's your read on that?
I mean, watching for a random half an hour during a Thursday practice in October, his handle did not look that much dramatically different. You talk to people who are at practice regularly, they say it's better and blah, 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 blah. So
he was quite confident in it.
He was, and he's always great to talk to because he is really, really bright. I think he's, if anyone on this team's a coach someday, I look at Isaiah, I look at Xavier.
And I cry for Xavier's first team.
Oh, dear God. Probably like a grade school team. He just runs them into the ground. But Isaiah, talking about himself and expanding his game, he said all the right things. He said everything you would expect to hear. You know, it's just a matter of if he can do it. And he knows the questions that surround his game. Buy, sell. I buy the fact that he's the option there. Like, they're going to try it. Now, whether it works or not, I have no idea. But, you know, if I had a bet today leading field goal attempts, I would bet Isaiah.
My question is, who's number 2 in assists?
Who's number 2 in assists?
That's the real question.
It's a good question. What would your guess be?
That's the Juwan Howard answer. It's a great question. I would go, it's either Eli Brooks or maybe Franz. I don't know. I don't think it's Isaiah. And that's the biggest worry I have with the talk about Isaiah being the secondary creator, is that he's never really been a passer. He's a possession finisher almost always. And it's really hard to have, like, it's why, like, Iggy couldn't be the secondary creator last year, because he rarely, if ever, passed. But at the same time, he, I think, probably led the team in field goal attempts last year, right?
I think so. But, like, Iggy and Isaiah, I mean, they're just not comparable as players. And I think Isaiah, if he is skill-wise able to put the ball on the deck out of a ball screen, whatever, get into the middle of the floor, I think he would be more inclined to be a willing passer
Yes.
than Iggy would in a million billion years.
But he's a escape passer, not an attack passer. He makes the easy pass.
Well, but you're also saying that based
On his role last year,
on a different
that's true.
role. So, if he is capable of 3 dribbles through a screen, head up, being the biggest question.
That's true.
Because the ball handling questions are, if his head is up and he sees a guy, I think he can make passes.
Last year when Charles got hurt, he got most of his only ball screens.
Mm-hmm.
And he would either dribble into a pull-up jumper, or he would take 3 dribbles where he would pull up and then pass it back to the replacing guy
Right.
coming from to the wing, right?
And the biggest question will be, like, the worst case scenario for Michigan is if they have him doing, I feel like, action like that, and the offense is a different level of offense, because that replace guy there, like John Beilein's offense is what it was. Like, we're not going to sit here and praise it for the 1,000th time, but like that guy was always going to be there. Mm-hmm. And with it now, like, what does it look like now? Who has any idea? Because if it just ends up being a guy like Isaiah dribbling into a crowd,
and that's a scary thing.
That could be bad. When you talk about how like things can go sideways, like those are little ripples, I feel like, that you'd be talking about. Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't know what to really think. Like, it's a really sort of a light bulb thing when you learn to see the whole floor and pass out of ball screens. I always think back to like Tim Hardaway Jr. kind of learning the same thing early in his career, and he literally never passed ever, and then realized, I'm 6'6", I can just throw it over the top for a dunk, right? So that is a thing that you just have to grow as a player. And I know Isaiah's done all these drills all summer with Michael Lancaster. Yeah. I mean, we'll see, right? Like, that's, for me, especially early, because he's the one constant that is going to be out there. If he can really be something beyond his role last year, that's a big step. And even if he's just his role, that's a good thing, but I think they need a little more from him.
Like, I feel like the 2 pivots for the season, it's Franz and Isaiah.
And they both kind of play the same position.
And they could play them at the same time. And, like, Franz, even today, were you there when he said that, like, one of the guys that he's really dealt with the most and enjoyed being around the most is Isaiah? And he said, because we play the same position. Well, they have to play a lot together, right?
I would think right now that Franz probably is a 6-man.
That's interesting.
Because...
So you think Eli at the 2?
I think right now it would be Eli at the 2 and Brandon at the 4. And I think because Franz can play every position, he's the perfect 6-man. And I think... Because Franz can play the 2, 3, 4, right?
Right.
I think there's just a question. Like, that was what the plan was for Iggy last year, right? You were in Spain. Where did he play? Off the bench. All of a sudden, he was too damn good to play off the bench, so you have to change something. That might come. And I know Martelli talked today about how Juwan really tried to load manage, although he also pointed out that load management was a bunch of bullshit. Franz early in the year, because of how long of a schedule he played.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it too. Wow. Not trying to put too much on him. The 2 guys you want to really pump up are Eli and Brandon. So
totally,
if you give them every opportunity now to hold off Franz, maybe that works better.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have to play Creighton. Maybe Franz is in the starting lineup.
The long-term benefit of, let's just let Franz do his thing, learn, watch, whatever, and go all in, because it doesn't matter. If the time comes in mid-January and you're just like, all right, it's time to just let this guy go, and then you do it then.
The question's always who's on the court at the under 8 timeout in the second half in a close game.
Right.
And I would think Isaiah and Franz are both on the court in that situation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that right now it seems like he could come off the bench, which the guy everyone's talking about. It's kind of an odd nugget at this point, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I don't really think it matters.
It doesn't at all.
I mean, if you tell me, the real bet would be in February. And when you talk about February, I would bet damn near anything that
I'm curious.
is your prime, like,
All right,
because it's minutes. It's not, who cares about starters?
Here's
It's
a question
minutes.
for you. 5 starters against Appalachian State. How many of those guys are starting on February 15th? What's your lineup changes? How many?
Okay, so if we operate under the assumption that, let's say, starting lineup.
I mean, you have 3 locked in, so it's...
Yeah. But I think Brandon Johns, if I had to bet today, is probably going to have a roller coaster season of start out, be given every opportunity, show flashes, probably have hard times, drop down, but the talent rises to the.
Mm-hmm.
It's just years of just watching this stuff. Like you just watch the guy play, and it's there somewhere, and how it comes out and how it manifests itself, I don't know, but like. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy who starts the year, drops out, comes back.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I could certainly see that being the case. And then
The 2.
so in that case,
Could be 2 people.
it could be 2 people. All right, so we're just going to touch a little bit here on the open practice portion of the media availability that we had today. I would say the first half, what were they open for? 40
It was
minutes?
about 30, 45 minutes, I think.
The first half of it was like dribbling and like passing type stuff where it's look when you're in our jobs and you get availability to practice, it's usually relatively common for conveniently that portion of practice to be the most bare bones stuff that you'll see. Like on the football side, when you get open practice, it's like the dude's stretching. And in basketball, you see dribbling drills.
What's interesting to me is that before, I don't think Beeline looked at, like, Beeline, that was like a priority for him, right? Like, we would see that a lot, but that was almost like the story at first,
Sure.
right? It's like these, like, he was all, like,
Mike
he lives
is-
with that stuff, right? This felt a little less organized than that, or just, right? Like, it's just different. You could tell, like, the tone of the practice overall, I think, was a little different. You agree with that?
Totally. Yeah, there was music blasting during some stuff that, you know, that just probably wouldn't have happened in the previous regime. It looked like it was. I mean, it's so hard. I'm not going to draw any actual philosophical takeaways of how who's doing what staff wise, who has the voices, you know, what does Juwan do and don't do. He sure as shit looked like the head coach out there. You know what I mean? Like
I didn't.
Anyone
did you
that
expect anything different?
I don't know. I
There's
feel
like
like
a narrative out there that I disagree
exactly.
with.
I feel like there's some perception that he's, I don't know, like maybe Martelli's doing more overseeing stuff, or he's more quiet and laid back, because publicly he's very quiet and laid back. The practice that we watched, it was clearly one head coach out there. It was Juwan Howard, and everything ran through him.
I think the only coach who stopped a drill and instructed individually or in a moment, like the whole team, was Juwan Howard. Right? I mean, he was the voice. I didn't see any sort of Martelli running things. I mean, it was Sadi that ran the early stuff as like just doing an assistant job, right? It's not like there's a
When you say running stuff, it was literally, all right, 2 dribbles left hand, crossover, 2 dribbles right hand.
It was
that
running
stuff.
stuff in the idea of Juwan doesn't have to run it, right? Like, it's more of an administrative task. I think that the idea that Martelli is this guy running everything and like just like it's overblown. It's gone too far. Right?
I agree.
I think rules, recruiting, stuff like that, he's probably an invaluable resource. Practice plans, I'm sure they lean on him a lot more because the
Organizationally.
idea of planning a practice with limited hours is probably foreign in the NBA, right? So stuff like that, yeah. It's just this idea that it's just Phil Martelli's running things. It's too convenient and too neat, and everyone loves to lean on it. But I think
I would say it's too dismissive of Juwan Howard. And I've read some, I've seen some stuff and read some stuff where I'm like, I kind of almost makes you feel like a little bit uncomfortable. Where I'm like, kind of what are you saying here? In terms of like, why wouldn't Juwan Howard be running things or a capable leader? Like, this dude coached in the NBA for 6 years. This is his dream job. He's being paid $2 million a year. He's the head coach, and all roads lead through him.
This project,
and the thing about Phil is like, dude, Phil's the most talkative guy, and he's a big name and all this stuff. But like, he would be the last dude to overstep a bound, of like
Philly dudes wouldn't do that.
Never of overfitting his role. If that
Here's
makes sense.
how I put it. This is Juwan Howard's project.
Mm-hmm.
This is Juwan Howard figuring out how to get his basketball vision onto the court from top down. Phil Martelli, Howard Isley, Sadie Washington, our assistant coaches, they're there to help him make that happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everyone involved knows that. I don't think it's a secret. Juwan's out here talking about laying in bed at night thinking of what he wants to do, and he's taking his last 25 years of experience and he's building that into his vision. It's his program. And yes, it's his first time as a head coach, but he calls the shots, and I think that's pretty clear. I think that anything else, I agree, it is dismissive, and it's just wrong.
Yeah. But I'm still fascinated by what actually happens come game time. And I actually mentioned this to Isaiah Livers when I was like, what's your level of curiosity of, what that 48 hours up to game time looks like? Because within the former regime, it was every minute accounted for. Just everyone knows. Anyone who's listening to this at this point knows exactly what I'm talking about. Like, what does it look like now in terms of film, in terms of accounting for every minute of the day, and blah 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 blah, and organizationally. And Isaiah, looked right at me and was like, "Man, that is by far the thing I am most anticipating and interested in and curious about, and it's just a whole new thing, and it'll all be dictated by Juwan Howard."
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
were there any player-wise stuff, anything that you saw in that open time that we had that, I don't know, you raised, whether it's someone's physique, whether it's, a guy shooting, anything that jumped out to you?
Johns had the one highlight. He had to kind of alley-oop dunk. I think, it's just hard to watch a practice and not focus on Xavier Simpson. Mm-hmm. Whether I think what Martelli said was he's got all the vinegar. He needs to bring a little more honey. But he just is – he's so aware of everyone else, and he'll take players aside. I saw him take Cole Bajema aside today to talk about a 3-on-1 drill that he kind of botched, and then he was encouraging him for the next 3 or 4 reps.
Right.
That's not a normal thing, really, that we would expect to see being in a practice for 30 to 45 minutes, right? And it's just, I think his leadership, it really since last summer, has just jumped off the page in any time we've ever seen them in practice, right? So,
can I just say something?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that jumped out to me about practice is how difficult it is to differentiate Cole from Franz, because one wears 21, one wears 22. They're both, 6'7" white dudes, relatively thin. And when I'm just saying, I was watching them in drills at one point, and at one time I thought Cole was Franz and Franz was Cole, and I went back and forth a couple times.
They move very differently.
Yeah, but where I'm sitting, where we were sitting.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
So, discount anything you say about practice, given that take. The other thing I noticed was I thought they were doing a lot of transition drills, more
They were moving
for longer periods of time. Like Michigan would do similar 3-on-2, 2-on-1 type of drills, right?
Yeah.
Under Beeline, but I just thought that the kind of consistent pace and how long they were running transition drills speaks at least a little bit to the idea that they're going to really want to run.
Yeah.
But like, I can't think of a time when we would, like, I feel like Beeline's practices are very short. Like they had like 5-6 minute segment of transition drills, which
they did that. They did that one. It felt like it was 15.
They did it, and they did again because they didn't hit their goal.
I couldn't, and I know it was a goal, and I couldn't tell if that was something that was done today because we were there, or if that's something every day.
Fair, but that was longer than I can ever like.
Right.
That consistent up. I mean, they're running full court.
Yes.
For 10, 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. Did you like the part where the shots being drawn up were basically transition 18-footers? I was sitting there thinking Dylan's blood is boiling over the brim.
Not great.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And I would bet if you charted the shooting percentage in it on the jump shots, it was team wide 38%.
It certainly wasn't plus EV.
No.
You want to be over. I mean, that's not a good shot, but
So
we don't have to get into that. I do think
I just didn't understand
those should be threes.
They should be run to the wing, shoot threes.
Yes. But I understand that there's a point to drill mid-range shots.
Sure.
I would prefer to drill them off the dribble because those are the ones that you're probably going to have to take that are worthwhile. A catch and shoot 18-footer is about the worst shot in basketball.
Right. On the move. Running full speed down court.
But
that's not a shot you really see. I just didn't understand. And look, all the dudes coaching on that court won more games than me, played more games, certainly, than me, because my career ended unsuccessfully in the Philadelphia CYO. But it just seemed like it was a lot of time, and I'm like, this is just a lot of time taking really bad shots.
I think that drill seemed like almost a conditioning drill to me, though, right? Like they wanted to get up, running up and down, and that was what really stood out. I mean, we only saw them run up and down, so of course that's what stood out, but
it's also dumb to draw any kind of conclusion off of watching a single 15, 20-minute drill
that
out
is
of a practice.
Specifically catered to allow us to probably see the least possible.
Yes. If they were like, let's draw this up so people can draw some really bad conclusions, that is the drill to run.
Best open practices last summer before Spain. Beeline was gone.
Yes.
They were just running practice.
Absolutely.
Some missed memos there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Anything else?
I think that's a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. So we will come back next week. We will touch on Michigan State. We will have a special second podcast next week that I'm not sure if we'll run it live next week or the following, but it'll be a good one, we promise. And
it's a bold statement.
No, that's going to be a good one. I'm excited for this one. Anything from you on the way out?
Shut it down.
Subscribe to UM Hoops. I feel like this is kind of the first big domino in what will be a fascinating recruiting process for this 2020 class for Michigan. So if you're not subscribed to Dylan's site and you're not checking it out, you are misinformed. So do that and subscribe to The Athletic while you're at it. Just do me a favor.
I would say the next month
it's
going to be one of the most fascinating 30 days that we've really had in Michigan basketball for a while.
Other than when John Beeline left for the Cavs 6 months ago.
We'll learn more. We're going to learn so many, between the early signing period, the first month of the season. There's before we're trying to figure stuff out, we don't know anything, right? It's sort of like a roller coaster. This is going to actually tell us what the next several years are, right? That's really when you learn and when we can figure out, this is what this is what that is, this is how this is going to work. For now, it's all just talk. Now we're going to finally see what everything looks like.
Right. And then November 5th, there will be basketball.
Well, that's in the next month.
There
That's
we go.
included.
There
That's
we
what
go.
I'm saying.
And you'll be in Ann Arbor, and I'll be in New York with Michigan State, and we will be potting at like 3 o'clock in the morning that night, I assume. But that's just a little peek ahead for you folks. So you
Probably tuned out long
loyal
ago, but that's fine.
subscribers. So thank you for subscribing, though. If you wouldn't mind, be so kind and leave us a review on iTunes. It helps people find the podcast, or so we're told, and that's what it's all about. We really get nothing out of doing this. It's really just for
you,
because we're pretty sick. But so leave a review if you don't mind, and after you do that, be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.